Hi, Dave.
Hi, how
Where
are
have
you?
you been?
Oh, I've been here and
That's
there.
true.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, we're back, kind of.
yeah, we are back. We have been taking a little bit of a pause, or I should say you have,
Yeah.
and you've shared a little bit about that in your monthly updates with TTR, but here we are again, and you've decided to press play.
Yeah.
You're done press and pause. You're going to re-engage in some different ways. You've been attending to some things in your life, in your health, in your soul. Um, and we're glad that you're back and you're ready to talk about some things and jump back into doing some videos, among other things. So um, tell us what we're going to talk about today and what drew you to that.
One was I did want to kick back into some of these teaching videos that I do with you, and it just matters a lot. But I just thought a really good way to enter in would be to do a 4-part series on Advent, and this is the first week of Advent, so we're not too late, and we're going to get this out as quickly as we can, and it'll follow a pattern all the way up to Christmas. So we'll have one of these a week for the next 4 weeks, and people will be able to enter into that. But one of the reasons I was trying, and it feels really good. Well, one, it's Advent, so that makes sense. But the other thing is that, and even affected me last Sunday when I was at church and we were talking about the first week of Advent, was that I want to do these because I need to be reminded of the story. Like I'm kind of the teacher guy who I'm here to remind you of the story. I need to remember the story, and it hit me pretty deeply. And then one of the ways I remember it is by getting into it like this and teaching it. And so it felt kind of personal, to get back into this story and re-engage my own imagination and as to how big this story is and how much it actually does mean to me. Because sometimes it starts to feel like a fairy tale, to tell you the truth, and that's the part of the story I'm not interested in. The story I want to remember and re-engage in and help other people re-engage in, if I can, is not the romanticized version of Advent or Christmas. It's not the sanitized version, that like a bedtime story is just really nice for little kids and helps you go to sleep. But that's the problem. You just go to sleep. There's nothing that connects with reality. There's nothing actually that's inspiring or frightening. I think the story of God and our participation is sometimes frightening, and there's a lot at stake, and but it's very inspiring, and more than a little interesting. I've got this weird thing about Christmas, and I don't think I'm a curmudgeon, but sometimes my wife thinks I am, and she's probably right about that. But like we sing songs at Christmas, and I have a hard. So okay, the number one song for Christmas is Silent Night. Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. I love that song. I love singing it. I feel a little romantic. I can even close my eyes and imagine being in the auditorium with candles and Silent Night, Holy Night, all is calm, all is bright. It wasn't calm, it wasn't bright. The actual Advent experience. If you want to actually be in the story, you're going to have to imagine something that wasn't very common, wasn't very bright. The slaughter of the innocents that was the result of Jesus or Mary saying yes to, the Holy Spirit. Will you allow this life to grow in you? And life was born, and then Herod was threatened by it. The slaughter of the innocents wasn't very common. It wasn't very bright. It was very dark. And there's something about that part of the story that makes it more real to me. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or curmudgeon-y, but on that first Christmas and the Advent and what it took the people who were in that Advent episode of Christmas, and I'll explain why I'm calling it an episode. No one was sleeping, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep. No one was sleeping. They probably couldn't sleep. They were running for their lives to Egypt. They were scared to death. Mary, in particular, what in the world does it mean? I'm going to have a child, and I'm never been with a man, and yeah, that's kind of a tough sell. We'll talk about that more next week. She wasn't calm, was Mary, when she went to Elizabeth, hoping Elizabeth could somehow explain to her what was happening to her, this life of God in her. Lots of stuff on that next week. And again, no one was quiet at the slaughter of the innocents. In fact, in Matthew 2, it says, a voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted. Merry Christmas. There was nothing ho, ho, ho about the real story of Advent. And so we talk at Open Door a lot about entering the story, engaging in the story. Where are you in the story? You may be in the story of Advent if you're in a dark place, more than if you're in a ho, ho, ho place. You get it? Yeah. I think I know you do. That whole thing of sleigh bells ring, are you listening? I'm not against that stuff. It's just a different story. There's nothing bad about it and evil. It's just a different story. And to understand the Advent story, one of my favorite ways to explain it is, and the context that we need to understand it, is to compare it to the Star Wars trilogies. I've done this before, but I love this comparison because, like Advent, try to hang with me here. This is very weird. The Star Wars movies were actually several different episodes, little different pieces of the story, and they were all part of a bigger story. We call them the Star Wars trilogies. There were 3 trilogies, so there were 9 movies. I know there were more Star Wars things than 9, but each trilogy had 3 stories. But the very first Star Wars episode that ever was out there came in 1977. I was 25 years old. I'll never forget it. When Star Wars hit the movie theaters, it was epic. We'd never seen anything like it. It was an unbelievable story. In some ways, it was a great standalone story, but you did kind of wonder, where'd this come from and where's it going? And at the end, I don't remember everything about the end, but there was this really, you kind of knew there's got to be more. There was more. And then there was more after that. And then you found out there was all sorts of things before that. So you're sitting in the first movie of Star Wars. It's the first episode we've ever seen. But as time goes on, you realize there was a story before that and a story before that. There were 3 before that. This was the first one that we ever saw, was actually the first episode of the second trilogy, but it was the 4th episode. And I know this makes no sense anymore. I've lost everyone. But it was the first one we saw. So that was our entrance into this incredible story that we know as Star Wars. And when I first saw Star Wars, and then you started smelling the fact, oh, there was something after this and there was something before this, like a lot of other people, I got hooked on the story. So I became very curious. What did come before? What did come after? And I couldn't get enough. I knew there was a prequel. I knew there was a sequel. And before I knew it, like a lot of people, I was immersed in the story. I mean, there's kids today who are much younger than me who can tell you every episode and who were the key players and where Luke Skywalker came. And I didn't get that crazy, but you get immersed in the story. And when you get immersed in the story, you start connecting the dots. And there's a whole lot of, whoa, I didn't, after you've seen this one, you go back and all of a sudden things make sense. And the story kept getting bigger and it started feeling more real. And the stories just started coming alive. And not everybody did that, meaning not everybody got like obsessed with all of the Star Wars things. They might have seen that one episode that I saw in 1977, which was the 4th episode, actually. And it was a standalone story. And, oh, yeah, it was a good movie, but they never connected the dots. It never got to become a bigger part of the story. And it was the only part of the story they knew. Well, I think that's analogous sometimes to Christmas and Advent, because sometimes people's only exposure to, or sometimes their first exposure to the story, and I'm talking about the story of God from the beginning of time. Some of our first experiences with that story, some people's, is the Advent story. And for some, that's all it ever is. It's just around Christmas time, we go, Okay, we're going to tell that story again about Jesus in a manger and a lady who is a girl and she had a baby and blah, blah, blah. And blah, blah, blah is what it kind of can become. There's one of the reasons if you've never, but they never become immersed in the story. Like there's a prequel to this. Something came before this baby getting born thing, and something came after this baby getting born thing. And the more you get into that, you start connecting the dots. It becomes a much bigger story, and it's an epic story. But if you never connect the dots to Advent, this Advent episode, that's when I think the story can become domesticated and romanticized and just becomes a cute little story, feel good Christmas story full of Christmas cheer and Christmas carols and Christmas trees and Christmas presents. And again, there's nothing wrong with Christmas presents and Christmas, nothing at all. It's just not the story. And it doesn't inspire me at all. I mean, I like it, but it's not the story, and it's not going to save me or you. And all of that becomes obvious when you immerse yourself in the rest of the story. So if you just came in and watched the movie that is the Advent episode, but that made you curious about what happened before and what happened after, you can start connecting the dots, and you realize, well, there's sequels and prequels and sequels, and it's a much bigger story. And among the first things you begin to see is that this Advent episode that we're in right now, with all the Christmas stuff, every department store you go in, you hear the Christmas music in the background. Well, all of the actual Advent episode was a make or break time part of the story. The big story of God. Now we're in this Advent episode, and it's make or break, where everything about the story of God is at stake. Because if this part of the story, this Advent part, if this doesn't happen, if the hero drops the ball, if Mary doesn't say yes, the story's over. Now, it might come back a different way because God does what he does. But this whole story that began long ago in a galaxy far, far away, kind of Star Wars-esque, the story is over. So with all of that in mind, let me tell you the story, the big story, into which Advent fits. And I think it actually helps me understand, and helps others, I hope, understand Advent better and enter into this story, because it all began a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, if you will. When the God of the universe said in Genesis 1, let there be light, and there was light. And when he looked at his creation, he said that it was tov, it was good. It was shalom, but it didn't take long for the darkness to return, because it was very dark, and then the light came, but it didn't take long for the darkness to return, for shalom, this the way things ought to be, the way God designed things to be, for that to be shattered, for Eden to be lost, and then for Adam and Eve, who were the crown of God's creation in the beginning of this big story, began doing what we've been doing ever since. When they saw that they were naked, the first thing they did was to hide. The first thing they felt was shame, and the first thing they did was to hide, and we've been hiding ever since. And when that happened, this voice came from heaven, as it were, saying, Adam, where are you? Meaning God's looking for Adam. Eve, where did you go? Meaning God is looking for his creation. And that's when the story takes an unexpected turn, because now the story of God that began in the garden with shalom, naked and not ashamed, face-to-face union with God, it turns into a rescue mission. So everything's shifted. The story shifts. So now God's on a rescue mission to, against all odds, restore what was lost, to heal what was wounded, to rescue the whole human race. I mean, this is epic. Okay, this is Star Wars-esque. We're going to rescue the whole human race. It's the big story of God. And like all the great stories, the epic stories, the story of God has all the great themes. They're universal themes. We've talked about this before. So you've got life and death struggles, you've got good and evil, you've got hope and despair, deeds of courage, you've got acts of betrayal, the making of friends, the grieving of death. But always, one of the things about all these epic stories, including the story of God, are these unlikely heroes. This is a really important piece. These unlikely, unimpressive players in the whole thing. All the epic stories have them. In Star Wars, Luke Skywalker, for instance, comes from nowhere. He's facing the evil Empire and Darth Vader in what's the Bilbo Baggins, Frodo and Sam. I can't remember the name of them, but they're facing Mordor and Lord Sauron. Well, they're hobbits. The whole point is they are insignificant, unremarkable people. They're hobbits. They're unremarkable people from unremarkable places. And all of a sudden, they're drawn into a story that's much bigger than they knew and much bigger than them. And so Mary is perfect right now. Now we're in the Advent story. So Mary just fits that unremarkable person profile, a 15-year-old girl from the backwater town of Nazareth. She's a hobbit. She's not sitting there, I hope I become the mother of God. She's a hobbit. She has no expectations, but she's entrusted with the gold ring, if you will, the secret weapon that will save the day, save the whole human race. Mary, you kidding me? Unremarkable people, and all of that's part of the story. This unlikely people being used from unremarkable places, but it started long before Mary. It started with people like Abraham from Ur of the Chaldees. More unremarkable you could not have been than Abraham. Now he's the father of the faith, so he's great. No, when he started, unremarkable person. Then came Isaac and Jacob and Moses. Moses was kind of rescued from the backside of a Midian desert and used by God. David was so unremarkable in his early years that when Samuel came looking for a king, going to Jesse, his father, and saying, one of your sons is a king, David was so unremarkable, his own father didn't see in him any potential to be the king. And so he was, even David fits that unremarkable character that fits into all of these stories. And time would fail you if I were to tell you of Gideon and Barak and Jephthah. That's in Hebrews 13, all of them hobbits. They're just all hobbits of people like you and me and Mary, hobbits. But here's the deal, as faithful and heroic, now I'm back into this story, of all those, as faithful and heroic as all of those people were, I'm talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Barak, Jephthah, Samuel, none of them could repair the breach. None of them could restore shalom. So there's a tension in the story. What's going to rescue, save the day? So in the fullness of time, says Galatians 4, we come to the fourth episode in this big story, which is actually the first episode of the second trilogy of Star Wars, or the story of God, and we call it Advent. It's the fourth episode in the story of God. It's the Advent episode. That's why I love to kind of think of it like that. But to understand the story, to enter into it and experience it, we need to know certain things that are going on in the very first scene. If this was a movie, if it actually was a movie, Advent, and we were watching it, and the screen, the curtain goes back. They don't have curtains anymore, but the first scene starts. I guarantee if it was done right, the first scene would be very dark. It would look apocalyptic. It would look like a post-apocalyptic, nuclear blah. And it's been dark for a very long time. The human race is at the end of its rope. So to enter into the Advent story, you got to start dark. There's no ho ho ho. There's no sleigh bells ring. Are you listening? And the laying snow is glistening. And not in Advent. If you're in Advent, you're going, what the heck is going on? I don't see any hope in my marriage. I don't see any hope in this. And this is part of the intertestamental time, is that the people of God had not heard from God for hundreds of years. And so Advent begins not with sleigh bells ringing, it begins with longing and lament. That's where Advent begins. And if you're in longing and lament, longing for something better, for something more, and lament for what you've lost, you're in Advent, which is weird. I don't usually hear that. You're in Advent. Begins with longing and lament. Psalm 80, Isaiah 64, the cry of both of those in a variety of ways is, how long, O Lord? How long will you stay distant and detached and not get yourself involved in that? So the opening scene of the Advent episode is dark. Again, it's been dark for a very long time. And here's what the people in Mary's day were praying: Lord, rend the heavens and come down. Again, Isaiah 64, Psalm 80 as well. Make your name known, make the nations tremble. That would be one of the prayers. Stir up your power. So that's what people were praying. And if you're kind of going, God, do something, God, you might be at the beginning of the Advent episode, because what they were looking for in the darkness that they had been in for a very long time, and what they were longing for was something big. Stir up the heavens. Stir up your power. Make your name known. I want Air Force One to land. I want a bazooka to come and blow up all the bad guys. I want something big, and I want something. They're praying for something out there, like something way out there that could come in and just save the day. But when the Advent episode begins, and then it plays out, what they've been waiting for, when what they've been waiting for arrives, and what they've been waiting for is God to intervene. It wasn't big. It wasn't a bazooka. It was a baby. Thank you very much. I didn't need a baby. There's no hope there. It wasn't big. It was little. It wasn't out there. It was near. It was as near as Mary's yes. And sometimes the work of God is as near as your yes and mine to God, whispered. It's not even very loud. It wasn't a bazooka, it was a baby. It wasn't a conquering king. It was a 15-year-old girl. You gotta be kidding me. Two things, kind of wrapping it up here. And just to get it going, and we'll pick it up next week, that the primary theme of the Advent episode is that God does big things through really small things, through unremarkable people and who are from unremarkable places, like you, like me. And so all of a sudden, there's hope for me to be in that story, actually, because we're not all that remarkable. The second thing is this, it's just something to take away from this introduction, is that sometimes in looking for and longing for relief from the darkness, we keep looking for and longing for the big thing out there somewhere. Come save me. And if we keep looking for that, we might miss the little thing that's right in here, even the thing that's near, the things that's small. Henry Nouwen has this quote that I was just going to read it to you, and it kind of captures my imagination relative to what I'm talking about here. He says this, that the secret of waiting, which is what Advent is, it's a season of waiting for the arrival. The secret of waiting is the faith to believe that the seed has been planted and that something, though small and unseen, has already begun to grow. Active waiting means to be fully present to this moment. So it's not all out there. In the conviction that something is happening right here where you are, right under your nose, and you want to be present to it. So the call of Advent would be to go, okay, I wouldn't mind if something big happened, but I'm not going to quit looking for something big. And I want to begin to be aware of seeds that have already been sown and might be growing, and I don't want to miss them. I don't want to miss them. I want to be present to the little that might be right in front of my face, to the near that might be right here so I can see it. A waiting person, Nouwen says, is someone who believes that this moment is the moment of arrival. there's a liturgical prayer, and I will kind of close with this. There's a liturgical prayer we pray during this season of Advent, this episode of Advent. And it's this, that Christ has come, and he already has. So from where we sit in history, Christ has already come 2,000 years ago, but Christ is coming. So Christ has come, Christ is coming, but that's an awareness that Christ is coming now. He is active now. So he is in the present doing that, and Christ will come again. And I don't think, so Christ is coming, Christ has come, Christ is coming, Christ will come again. I don't think that's speaking of the second coming. I think what that means is Christ is coming again and again and again and again and again, in little ways and in big ways. But in your longing for the big thing, don't miss the little thing that God may be doing right in front of your face, and you're missing it because you keep looking for the big thing, the out there thing. It may be closer than you think, because in this episode called Advent, which actually the first Star Wars episode was called The Rise of Hope. That's what I would call this one, The Rise of Hope. The darkness is gone, but people don't see this. It's even like Jesus didn't come in a blaze of light. He came like a candle. I mean, he was a little baby. A candle whose flame could easily be blown out. This episode called Advent, it started with a seed and a young girl named Mary who said, "Let it be done," and it was. And that little thing she did changed the world. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I don't even know what to say, because several times when you're talking, I feel like, you feel the tears start to build up in your chest and in your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you said something to me offline the other day just about fighting for your own faith, and the things that we believe and the things that we understand and we don't understand and the things we want. And all that desire is there, and this is refreshing to a dark place. And I'm not just speaking for myself. I think like the world, right? This is the reality of living on earth, and life is dark and life is hard, and
it's easy
hard to enter in. Go ahead.
Well, it's easy to despair.
Yeah.
To become hopeless. And I think what's weird is, even as you say that, Annika, you're helping me say what I was trying to say. That if you're aware of the darkness and feeling overwhelmed by the darkness, you might be in Advent. Yeah. But you're going to be around a lot of stuff around this Christmas season that is going, ha ha ha, happy, happy, happy. They ain't happy. Well, that's not Advent. You're maybe more in Advent. And there is a thing. There's a warning here. It's for me. Because sometimes we can get real demanding of God in our Lord, rend the heavens and come down. Just do something. Boom, bring a bazooka. And his work is almost always, it always starts. This story of baby is so profound, because if you were actually there when the baby was born, and this is the answer, I'd be not very happy with that answer. I need something a little bigger than a baby. If we're going to take down Herod, anyway, but this is God's way. And as his people, we don't want to miss that. And it may be nearer than you think. It may be growing right in front of you. It may be in your family already, but you're looking for some other kind of cure, and it's not going to come that way. It's going to come a more kingdom, messy way, godly,
upside down.
Yeah. So.
Well, this is quite the way to kick off this Christmas season. I'd say I've never heard a Christmas sermon like this before, except I have.
This one.
Yeah. But it always hits in a little different way, kind of depending on what season in life I'm in, right? God always refreshes my heart towards him and the story that he's trying to draw me into,
Yeah.
and the things that he's calling me to. So I'm excited to keep talking about this. So we'll see what you dig up for next week, huh? Where are we headed next week? I know you already know.
Yeah, we're going to talk about, I want to talk about Luke 2, where Mary gets the word from the angel that she's going to have a child. And I love it that she was not excited about that. She was very troubled, and she ran to Elizabeth. And I want to talk about who I think Elizabeth is archetypally, and why Mary would go to her. And I think, because I think we all know somebody like an Elizabeth, and we've all been a Mary who's needed an Elizabeth who can tell us and explain to us this the work of God in us. So we'll talk about that
I'm excited for that.
next week.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks, Dave, for starting us back up here again. Excited to be online with you again and doing all this and hearing what God has for us. So till next week. See you later.
Thanks, Annika.
Welcome.